If you've been paying attention to financial news for the past few months, you have probably heard of WallStreetBets, an online community that grabbed headlines for its involvement in the GameStop saga, where fervor driven by retail traders on that forum was purportedly responsible for sending the stock soaring. But the WallStreetBets community has been around for a while, even though its explosive growth came only recently in 2021. Which brings us to the question, how good is WallStreetBets as a stock advisor? What is the performance of the WallStreetBets portfolio? Let's test it out. To answer that question, we first have to set the criteria for when a stock is considered popular or recommended. There are several indicators of popularity we can rely on, the first being the number of upvotes each post gets. The second is the number of comments, with each comment also having associated votes. An arbitrary rule for deciding when consensus is reached or when to buy a stock is when there are more than 10 popular bullish posts, each with more than 100 popular comments. Applying a similar rule, starting back in 2017 up to early 2021, we can then find tickers that meet this criteria. Note that these only represent a noisy selection of tickers. Many of the posts on WallStreetBets are videos or images rather than text, making them harder to parse. Furthermore, while many other tickers such as Snap have appeared on the forum, they often have mixed bearish or bullish signals. Lastly, the choice of the popularity threshold is completely arbitrary and was chosen to arrive at a reasonable number of pick stocks. With that said, how would such a portfolio have performed? Imagine if you had invested $5,000 in these stocks once they passed the popularity threshold. How much would you have today? Let's consider 3 different scenarios. Firstly, let's consider what happens when you sell when the stock dips by twice the average true range. Here, we plot a chart of each individual stock's performance, assuming you had invested $5,000 in it once it reached the popularity threshold. On the right, we monitor both the principal, or the total amount of money put in, as well as the total equity, the value of all the stocks bought so far. Once a stock dips below twice the average true range, we sell it, resulting in a flat line in the equity for that stock. In this scenario, we end up with $150,000, with a principal of $115,000 for a return of 30%. What if, no matter how much the stock dipped, you held on to that stock, also known in the WallStreetBets community as having diamond hands? Here we replay the same simulation, this time without any selling. Note that this means holding the stock through very extreme dips. However, this strategy would also have resulted in vastly bigger gains for volatile stocks like Tesla, which skyrocketed in value later on. Here, we end up with $280,000 for a 140% return. Lastly, let's consider the case where, instead of buying that stock, you had bought SPY instead. In this simulation, at each time point where you had previously bought a WallStreetBets recommended stock, consider what would happen if you had invested in the SPY ETF. Note that the symbols now just mark the time point associated with that ticker, and not the actual ticker itself. In this scenario, you end up with $160,000 for a 40% return. Comparing the 3 different strategies, we see that buying and holding the individual stocks yielded the most favorable outcome. In 14 out of 23 of the cases, buying the stock was better than buying SPY, with several stocks exhibiting outsized gains. Of course, this is not financial advice, and historical returns are no guarantee of future returns. Furthermore, not everyone can withstand the very long drawdowns expected of such a strategy. With the GameStop saga still ongoing, and the millions of subscribers that WallStreetBets has gained, bound to produce even more predictions, time will tell how much signal one can actually get from crowdsourcing investment picks. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more ideas tested in production.